My brother smirked. Hope this goes without saying, but you need to pay me every time I take your kids to school. So I looked at him and said, not a good idea to issue demands when you owe me far more. I'm 39, a single dad of two. And until recently, I thought I was the kind of guy who didn't need recognition to do the right thing. I believed in family, in showing up, in being reliable even when no one clapped for it. I quietly helped when people needed help, never expecting a thank you card or a parade. I thought that if I kept being the dependable one, eventually, it would be noticed or maybe just respected. I was wrong. The story I'm about to tell started years ago. But the real unraveling, the part that made me realize just how entitled and selfish my own family could be, happened last month at my birthday dinner. Before that night, I had already spent years brushing off snide comments, biting my tongue during family events, and covering more emergencies than I could count. But that night flipped something in me. And once it flipped, I couldn't flip it back. My older brother Greg is 43 and has always had this self-appointed title of family man. He's the kind of guy who wants praise for basic decency. Helped dad change a tire once, he'll bring it up every holiday. Babysat someone's kid for an hour, he'll want an engraved trophy. Meanwhile, I was just there, always there. I picked up the phone when my sister needed someone to drive her drunk ex home at midnight. I canceled dates to stay with my niece when Greg's wife had a hospital emergency. I paid for repairs on my parents' roof when no one else stepped up, and I didn't say a word. That was the problem. I didn't say a word. I think that silence made me invisible to them. And when people don't see you, they don't think twice before stepping all over you. Now Greg has 3 kids. I have 2. We live in the same town, just about 10 minutes apart. My ex moved across the state years ago and barely sees our sons. So I've been raising them full-time, juggling work, school drop-offs, soccer practices, and keeping a roof over our heads. Greg and his wife, meanwhile, hit some rough patches. They fell behind on their mortgage multiple times. Their car got repo once. His wife lost her job, and he picked up side gigs that never seemed to last more than a few months. Each time there was a new excuse. The job market's rough, or it's just temporary. And each time I helped, I didn't wave it in anyone's face. I didn't sit him down and say, here's the receipt for the time I bailed you out again. I just helped quietly. I covered the difference on their mortgage when the bank sent final notices. I paid to get their minivan back when they had no way to get their kids to school. I sent anonymous money orders when their lights got shut off. And when his car finally broke down for good, I offered to drive his kids along with mine every morning and afternoon. Same school anyway. I added their names to the pickup list, rearranged my schedule, and just made it work. For almost 2 years, I was the school chauffeur 5 days a week, rain or shine. I never made it a big deal. Greg always said thanks in passing, and that was enough for me, or at least I thought it was. The first real hint that something was off came last Christmas. Greg pulled me aside after dinner right when everyone was starting to open gifts. He patted me on the back like he was about to give a heart-to-heart and said, "Hey, I noticed you didn't bring anything for my kids this year." His tone was joking on the surface, but his eyes weren't. I blinked a little stunned and said, "I thought the Nintendo bundle I gave you guys last month was their present," which it was. It had cost me almost $500. I had installed it myself. Greg just kind of smirked and said, "Oh, right. I guess I thought that was more of a family thing." A family thing, I didn't even know what that meant, but I laughed it off. I had to with everyone around. I told myself he was tired, stressed, that he mean it the way it sounded. But after that, things started to feel different. I started noticing how often my help got twisted into something transactional, like it was expected, not appreciated. My mom, who usually played referee, started making passive comments about how lucky I was to be single and not have to support a whole family like Greg. My sister said once that Greg sacrificed so much and deserved more support. I wanted to scream. Hadn't I been supporting them all? Then came my birthday. My younger son had wanted to throw me a little dinner. Just a few family members at this Italian place I love downtown. He even asked the staff ahead of time if we could use their projector for a slideshow of pictures he'd made. Just something sweet. That kid is 10 and has more emotional intelligence than most adults I know. So we booked the back room. I invited my parents, Greg and his wife, my sister, a couple cousins. Nothing fancy, just a family meal, or so I thought. The night started off fine. The slideshow made me tear up. And my son was beaming when everyone clapped. We ordered food, made small talk. Greg seemed unusually quiet, though, until dessert. That's when it happened. The waitress had just set down the cake, chocolate with caramel drizzle. And everyone was mid-laughter when Greg stood up. He held a manila folder in one hand like he was about to read out a toast. I thought he was going to embarrass me with some childhood story. I even smiled. He cleared his throat and said, "Jake, happy birthday. I know you like things neat and organized, so I put this together for you." He slid the folder across the table toward me. I opened it. Inside were printed invoices, dozens of them, dated and itemized. Rides to school, $10 per day times 146 days. Late pickup fees, missed work hours, all neatly tallied. Total due $14,600. I looked up thinking it had to be a joke. Greg chuckled. "Figured I'd do the math since you love spreadsheets. That's just for last year. I didn't even count the early mornings." Someone snorted. Then my sister burst out laughing. "Oh my God, are you serious?" she said, nudging Greg's arm. He shrugged. "Hey, gas isn't free. Neither is time. The whole table was laughing except me. I didn't laugh. I looked down at the folder again, then back up at Greg, who was already raising his wine glass like he just delivered the punchline of the year. But I wasn't amused, because what they didn't know, what none of them had known until that very moment, was that I had my own receipts, years worth, and I'd finally had enough of pretending I didn't. I reached into my jacket pocket. My fingers brushed against the flash drive I'd been carrying around for weeks, tucked in the inside pocket of my jacket. It was supposed to be for something else entirely. A quiet conversation I'd planned to have with my mom, a last-ditch effort to help her see what had been happening all these years. But as I stared at Greg, still grinning smugly with his wine glass raised like he was the king of comedy, something shifted in me. I could feel it. Not anger, not yet. It was colder than that. It was the kind of clarity that comes right before the storm. I didn't say anything, not yet. I tucked the flash drive back into my pocket, slowly closed the folder, and placed it neatly back on the table. "Thanks," I said softly, looking him dead in the eyes. "That's very thorough." He blinked. "I figured you'd appreciate the details." "Oh, I do," I replied, voice steady. "I really do." The table laughed again, thinking I was playing along. My mom was wiping tears from her eyes, saying, "Jake, don't be so serious. You know Greg's just teasing. You always take things so personally." I nodded. "Sure, just a joke. Got it." But inside, something cracked. Not shattered crack. Like a hairline fracture that had been forming over years of being the backup plan, the emotional punching bag, the invisible support beam holding up a collapsing structure no one ever thanked. After dinner, I drove home in silence. My sons were already with my neighbor. I'd arranged for them to stay the night since it was supposed to be my relaxing birthday evening. That didn't happen. I poured a glass of whiskey, sat down at my computer, and opened the folder Greg had given me again. I scanned through every line item, every invented charge. Waiting in traffic, $400. Missed work from morning drop-offs, $2,300. It was absurd, but what really got to me wasn't the number. It was the entitlement behind it. The audacity to hand me that folder with a smile to put a price tag on the one thing I had done out of kindness because I didn't want his kids to suffer for their parents' irresponsibility. That folder wasn't a joke. It was a message. I owe you. That's how he saw it, that I owed him. That was the night I realized I didn't have a family. Not really. I had dependents with shared DNA who saw me as a utility, not a brother or a son, just a guy with a wallet and a car, and no one to hold him back from bailing them out. The next day, I didn't answer calls. I needed space. I needed to think, but the universe wasn't done piling it on. 3 days later, my mom called. She left a voicemail I listened to twice because I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Hi, honey. I just wanted to talk to you about your brother. He's feeling kind of hurt that you didn't laugh with the rest of us the other night. You know how he jokes around. He was just trying to lighten the mood. Anyway, he mentioned you haven't paid him yet for all the school runs, and I think you really should, Jake. He's been under a lot of pressure lately and could use a little help." She paused, then added, "I mean, you make more than him, right? It's only fair." Only fair. That phrase echoed in my head like a gunshot. I didn't call her back. Instead, I opened the folder I'd started compiling on my flash drive months ago. I had started it the night I found out Greg's house was about to be auctioned off, and I quietly paid off the $9,700 in back mortgage just to keep his family from becoming homeless. At the time, I'd kept the receipts. Not for leverage. I'm not that kind of person. But just in case. In case someday I needed to explain to someone why I was always too tight on money, despite working full-time and living modestly. In case I needed to remind myself that I wasn't crazy, that I was doing more than my fair share. The file had grown over time. $600 for new tires for Greg's car, $3,200 for their HVAC repair, $850 in emergency dental for one of his kids. I'd paid directly to the office. Add to that the $190 here, $125 there. Food, school supplies, utility bills covered anonymously. The grand total was sitting just over $190,000. It was surreal. I read through the list with fresh eyes, each entry no longer just a number, but a little act of self-erasure, a decision I made to prioritize their comfort over mine, over my sons, over my sanity. And they laughed. That's what they did when it was time to celebrate my birthday. They laughed in my face and handed me a bill for my own kindness. 2 days later, I got another voicemail. This time from my dad. He was never one for long talks, but this one was nearly 5 minutes. He started off light, asking if I was okay, said mom was worried, then casually dropped the bomb. "Greg says you've been holding on to some documents that make him look bad. He mentioned you've been compiling some kind of file or list. Listen, Jake, whatever you're planning, let it go. It's just going the family more. We're supposed to help each other, not keep score." Keep score. Like I hadn't been playing the game alone this whole time. That night, I sat my sons down and asked them how they felt about the school ride setup, if they liked driving with their cousins, if they felt like it worked for them. My youngest said it was okay, but he didn't like when Greg would sometimes make them late because he needed 5 more minutes. My oldest admitted he'd seen Greg yelling at his own kids more than once, and it made him uncomfortable. I made a decision right then and there. I emailed the school the next morning and removed Greg's kids from my authorized pickup list. I didn't call to explain. 3 hours later, Greg texted, Hey, school says you dropped my kids. What the hell? I didn't reply. He followed up. You seriously going to do this over a joke? Grow up, Jake. Then I'll send you the updated invoice, this time with emotional damage added. That one made me laugh, but not in the way he wanted. Later that week, my mom called again. This time, she wasn't gentle. You're creating a wedge in the family, she said. You've always been so sensitive. Why can't you just let things go? Your brother's struggling and you're making it worse. I tried to stay calm. I really did. Mom? I said I've covered over $100,000 in his expenses. I never asked for a thank you, but handing me a fake bill in front of everyone? That wasn't a joke. That was a message, and I got it loud and clear. She huffed. You're exaggerating. Greg said it was barely a few thousand for the mortgage and you were just helping with groceries and stuff. It's not like you saved their lives. I hung up because that was the moment. The moment I realized they didn't just take me for granted. They had rewritten history in their own minds. My sacrifices were now anecdotes. My help repackaged as minor gestures easily forgotten or minimized. The next few days, I kept to myself, focused on work, spent time with my kids, but something was shifting. The silence was getting under their skin. Greg showed up at my house a week later. No warning, just rang the doorbell in the evening holding that same damn folder. I came to make peace. He said, voice dripping with false humility. Look, maybe I took the joke too far. Fine, I'll waive the fee. Happy I didn't let him in. I think we're past pretending. I said, you didn't come to apologize. You came to shut me up. He stiffened. Excuse me. I stepped outside, closed the door behind me. You're afraid I'll tell people the truth. About the mortgage, the car, the utilities? His face went pale. I have every receipt, I said calmly. Every email, every bank transfer, every notarized payment record. He laughed nervously. You're bluffing. I didn't respond. Just looked him in the eye for a long, uncomfortable second. Then I said, I'm planning something, Greg. You'll know when it happens. And I walked back inside. That was the breaking point. That was the moment I stopped being the quiet, dependable little brother and became something else entirely. I wish I could say that moment with Greg shutting the door in his face, telling him I was planning something, felt triumphant. That I walked away with my head high, fireworks in the distance, and a new sense of power coursing through me. But that's not what happened. The truth is, I closed the door, leaned against it, and just stood there. My hands were shaking. My stomach churned. I felt sick. Not from guilt. I had nothing to feel guilty for, but from the sudden weight of everything that had been building for years pressing down on me all at once. I wasn't used to saying no. I wasn't used to being seen. Not like that. And now that I had drawn a line, the fallout started almost immediately. The next day, I got a call from my sister Erin. Her voice was already sharp when I picked up. Jake, what the hell is going on? I stayed silent, waiting. Greg said you threatened him, that you're trying to destroy his family, that you're, what did he say? Digging up dirt to make him look bad in front of everyone? What is wrong with you? I took a breath. I didn't threaten him. I told him the truth. I've kept quiet for years while he treated my help like an allowance he was owed. I've given and he decided to mock me in front of the whole family. She scoffed. Oh, come on. It was a joke. It wasn't a joke, I said. And even if it wasn't funny. Not to me, not to my kids. She sighed like I was the difficult one. Jake, this is going to ruin the family. Don't make things worse. Click. I didn't have it in me to keep the conversation going. I was too tired, and it didn't stop there. I started getting cold shoulders in the family group chat. My mom posted a vague status on Facebook about loyalty and forgiveness, and half my aunts commented things like, family is everything, and some people forget who was there for them first. I hadn't said a word publicly, but Greg was already painting the narrative. He was good at that. The next week was quiet, unsettlingly quiet. I kept my head down, worked late, picked my kids up from school, tried to keep things normal. But even my boys noticed. Are we still going to Uncle Greg's house this weekend? My youngest asked one morning. No, I said not for a while. Did you guys have a fight? I hesitated. We're just taking a break from each other. That's all. He nodded slowly, but I could see the wheels turning in his head. Even at 10, he understood more than most adults gave him credit for. The real unraveling happened 2 weeks later. My parents hosted their annual spring barbecue. It was something we did every year. Huge backyard setup, grill running all day, kids playing soccer in the grass, old music playing through my dad's busted stereo. I hadn't missed one since I was 21. I wasn't invited. No call, no text, no mention in the group chat, nothing. I found out through my cousin Melissa, who texted me a photo of the setup. My dad flipping burgers, Greg and his wife laughing, Erin sipping wine with her fiancé. The caption just said, "Didn't think you were coming this year." I stared at the photo for a long time. It was the first time I really felt it. Not just the betrayal, but the exile. Like they'd closed the gates and locked me out. Not just for that day, maybe for good. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. But that night after the boys went to bed, I sat on the couch in the dark, holding a warm beer and feeling hollow. Like the years I spent holding up this family had been some long, elaborate con, And I was the only one who hadn't been in on the joke. I don't know how long I sat there. An hour. 2, long enough for the beer to go flat and warm in my hand. Long enough to realize that maybe, just maybe, I'd never been part of the family the way I thought I was. That was the fall. That was the bottom. And then slowly came the rise. It didn't start with some grand plan or overnight revelation. It started with the smallest thing, a choice. I turned off notifications for the family group chat. I archived it, muted it. That's simple. And then I did something else. I opened a new document on my laptop and titled it, What I Want. I stared at the blinking cursor for a long time. And then I started typing, I want peace. I want my kids to grow up without being guilt-tripped by people who only show up when they need something. I want to stop pretending that loyalty means obedience. I want boundaries. I want freedom. I wrote for hours, and by the time I stopped, I felt lighter, like I'd emptied a suitcase I didn't realize I was dragging behind me. That weekend, I started cleaning house. Not literally, though I did finally fix the leaky faucet in the kitchen. I mean emotionally, digitally, spiritually. I sorted through years of emails, bills, and transfers. I made copies of every payment I'd ever made for Greg and his family. I labeled everything. I filed it neatly into folders, both digital and physical. Not out of spite, out of clarity. I needed to see what I had done. And then I started putting that same energy into myself. I'd always had a side project I played around with in the evenings, an app for managing school pickups and carpools. It started as a joke with my sons, something to organize our weekly chaos. But the more I worked on it, the more useful it became. I started refining it, coding features, building a clean interface. And now, with the silence from my family ringing loud and clear, I had the time and motivation to take it seriously. I pulled late nights, built out the back end, taught myself new development tool. I created a beta version. I started reaching out to local parent groups asking for feedback. I launched a small test group. The response was better than I expected. A few weeks in, a mom from the PTA asked if she could share it with her network. A month later, I got my first licensing offer from a district rep. I wasn't aiming to get rich. I just wanted to build something that worked, something that mattered. But the money started coming anyway, steady, clean, earned. And for the first time in years, I felt a strange, almost foreign feeling pride. Not the kind you fake at family dinners while someone else gets the credit. Real pride, quiet-rooted. My boys noticed the difference too. You're smiling more, my oldest said one night out of nowhere. Yeah? I asked. Yeah, I like it. He didn't know what that meant to me. How those words hit harder than any praise I'd gotten in the last decade. We started doing more together, weekend trips, game nights, just sitting around and talking. Without the constant weight of family guilt hanging over me, I had room to breathe, to be present, to actually enjoy my own life. I even joined a local dads group, something I never thought I'd do. We met once a month for coffee and talked about parenting, work, boundaries. It felt weird at first, opening up to strangers, but it helped more than I expected. One night during a meeting, I shared a little of what had happened with my family. Not the full saga, just the basics. One of the guys, a retired lawyer named Steve, leaned forward and said, "You kept records?" I nodded. He smiled. "Good. Keep them. You never know when you'll need to remind people what reality looks like." I did, and I waited. Because while I was rebuilding myself, something else was crumbling in the background. Greg's life. I started hearing whispers through mutual friends. His wife had quit her job again. Their mortgage was past due. The car that I'd once helped retrieve had been repossessed again. The school sent out a notice about tardiness, and his name was mentioned in the PTA newsletter, not kindly. The difference this time, I wasn't there to catch the fall, and they noticed. Because when the safety net disappears, people start to panic, especially people who think they're entitled to it. The final straw. It came in the form of a text message from Greg after weeks of silence. No hello, no how are you? Just, "You really going to let your own niece and nephew get kicked out of their house?" And that was when I knew. He didn't learn a thing. He still thought I was the backup plan. Still thought I'd come crawling back with a checkbook and a smile. But I wasn't the same Jake anymore. The Jake who said yes to everything. He was gone. Greg's text sat there on my phone screen, like a loose match dropped into dry grass. "You really going to let your own niece and nephew get kicked out of their house?" He had no idea how that sentence would ignite everything. For years, I'd let things slide. I let jokes pass. I let my family's twisted view of fairness go unchecked. I had carried everyone else's burdens while quietly breaking beneath them. But I was done being the mule. The moment I read that message, not a question, not a plea, but an accusation, something inside me clicked into place. Not out of spite, out of clarity. Greg wasn't reaching out to make peace. He was pressing the same button he always had: guilt. And the problem was, that button didn't work anymore. Instead, I opened my laptop and pulled up a document I'd started weeks ago, right after the birthday dinner. It had a simple title, The Ledger. It was a comprehensive breakdown of everything I'd ever paid for, helped with, or cleaned up over the years for my family, particularly for Greg. But it wasn't just money anymore. I started including time labor, lost opportunities, missed vacations, and used PTO I burned driving his kids around or waiting in his driveway when he needed a minute. I wasn't inflating numbers. I backed everything with proof receipts, timestamps, emails, all logged, categorized, and cross-verified. I wasn't building a petty invoice. I was preparing evidence. I backed it all up in 3 places: a hard drive, in a fireproof box cloud storage under a different account, and an encrypted flash drive that I carried on me almost every day. Not because I was paranoid, because I was thorough, but a document, no matter how solid, doesn't speak for itself. So I started speaking. I didn't go nuclear, not yet. I started with quiet conversations, strategic ones. First was my cousin Melissa, the one who texted me from the barbecue. I invited her for coffee and laid it out. Not everything, just enough. She knew about some of Greg's struggles, of course, but she had no idea the extent of my involvement, the debt I'd erased, the time I'd lost. By the time I showed her just a portion of the ledger, her eyes were wide. "He made it sound like you abandoned them," she said quietly. "I did," I replied, "but only after carrying them for years." Melissa wasn't just a cousin. She was the one who ran the extended family group chats, who organized holiday meals, who quietly pulled the strings for almost every get-together. I didn't ask her to pick sides. I just gave her the truth. Next was Steve, the retired lawyer from the dad's group. I brought the flash drive to our next meeting. He looked through the files, then leaned back and crossed his arms. "You ever think about going public with this?" I raised an eyebrow. "Public, like how?" He smiled. "Family meeting, slide deck, full breakdown." I laughed, but he didn't. "I'm serious," he said. "These people build a house of cards on your silence. It might be time to blow gently, not to destroy, to reveal." I didn't commit to it that night, but the idea planted itself in my head like a seed. Later that week, I called the school district's transportation office and asked to speak with the carpool compliance coordinator. I told them I was just following up on a question from earlier in the year about who was authorized to drive Greg's kids and how liability worked if that person wasn't on file. The woman I spoke to was kind but firm. "We have no record of Mr. Greg's vehicle being registered in our system," she said. "Technically, if you weren't an authorized guardian, there were several policy violations." I thanked her, hung up, and added that to the folder. Then I pulled out Greg's message again and read it one more time. "Let your niece and nephew get kicked out." Not only had I not caused that, I had prevented it more times than they would ever know. That's when I started planning the dinner, my real birthday celebration. But this time, it wasn't just dinner. It was a presentation. I reached out to a friend of mine, Nate, who worked as a corporate event planner and owed me a favor. I asked him to help me book a semi-private dining room at the nicest Italian spot in town, the same one where the original invoice folder had been handed to me. "Same place," he said. "Exactly the same," I replied. "But this time, I'm choosing the guest list." The list was small, strategic. Just my parents, Greg and his wife Erin, and her fiancée Melissa, and a few family members who tended to sit on the fence. People who had quietly gone along with the mockery because it was easier than standing up to it. I told them all I wanted to do over. A quiet no-gifts dinner to reconnect. Greg replied about time. My mother's response: "So glad to hear you're coming back around." They had no idea. In the weeks leading up to the dinner, I prepped everything. I compiled the slides, simple, clean, titles like mortgage payments, 2018 to 2021 vehicle repossessions, prevented utilities, restored education expenses, emotional labor unpaid. Each slide had documentation, not to humiliate, to clarify, to show what they conveniently forgot. And then I added a final slide, just a black screen with 3 words: why I left. I didn't plan to yell. I wasn't looking to explode. I was looking to expose. And for the finale, I asked Steve, my lawyer friend, to show up halfway through, not to represent me, just to be there. A calm presence, a signal. I also arranged one last thing. A custom flash drive. It looked like a gold key. I had 10 of them made. Each contained the ledger, the presentation, the documentation, and a simple letter from me explaining why I had chosen to step back. One for each family member in the room. I didn't want to argue anymore. I didn't want to scream over the noise. I wanted to hand them the facts and let the silence speak. The day before the dinner, Greg texted me again. "Hey man, glad you're coming around. We knew you'd cool off." I didn't reply. I was done replying because the setup was complete. The room was booked. The projector was tested. The flash drives were packed in small black boxes. The truth was locked, loaded, and ready to be shown. Not to punish, to end the illusion, to set myself free. And the best part? They had no idea what was coming. The dinner was set for a Friday evening at 6:30 sharp. The same restaurant, the same back room. I wanted every detail to mirror the scene from my birthday. Like a stage reset for the final act of a play they didn't know they were starring in. I arrived 30 minutes early. Dressed simply. Clean button-down, jeans, nothing flashy. I brought the black boxes with the flash drives and set them beside each plate, like party favors at a wedding. The restaurant manager, a quiet guy named Luis, who remembered me from the birthday debacle, nodded respectfully when he saw me. "You sure about this?" he asked. I nodded once. "It's time." By 6:45, everyone had arrived. Greg strolled in with that same swagger he always carried when he felt in control. His wife followed, wearing a smug smile like she'd just been handed a winning lottery ticket. My sister Erin hugged me perfunctorily, barely hiding her condescension. My parents were warm but cautious. Everyone assumed I was here to apologize, to make peace. They didn't notice the projector already plugged in and ready behind the curtain. We ordered food, made small talk. I let them talk. I didn't interrupt when Greg made a half-hearted joke about surprise invoices. I didn't say a word when Aaron leaned across the table and said, "I'm just glad you're not being dramatic anymore." I just smiled. The waiter brought out the appetizers, and I let everyone get a few bites in before I stood up and lightly tapped my fork against the side of my water glass. The room quieted. "I want to thank you all for coming tonight." I began calm and steady. "It means a lot. I invited you here because there's something I've been meaning to share for a long time." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the gold key-shaped flash drive. The room looked puzzled. Greg squinted. "Don't worry," I said. "I'm not handing out invoices." A few chuckles. "But I am handing out the truth." I nodded to Louise by the door. He dimmed the lights and drew the curtain closed. Then I pressed play on the remote and stepped aside as the projector flickered to life on the screen at the front of the room. Slide 1, $1.90 for 46.17. Subtitle amount quietly spent by Jake Andrews from 2017 to 2024, covering family expenses. The room went silent. Click. Slide 2, mortgage payments. Greg's name, the dates, the exact amounts paid, copies of the bank transfers, screenshots of emails from his lender, including a line in one that read, "Thank you for resolving this outstanding amount. We are canceling the auction proceedings as of today." Greg's wife dropped her fork. Click. Slide 3, car payments, towing and repairs receipts from garages, proof of payment timestamps, license plate numbers, even the towing receipt from the night their car was impounded. My mother gasped softly. Click. Slide 4, utilities, power company invoices, screenshots of account logins, my name listed as payer on emergency restorations for heat, water, and electricity. Click. Slide 5, child expenses, new school shoes, field trip money, dental copays, lunch accounts, quietly refilled. All signed, all timestamped. All documented. Greg turned red, not from shame, from panic. He stood up like he was about to stop the presentation. I raised my hand without even looking at him. "Sit," I said. Something in my voice made him obey. Slide 6, messages. A collage of texts cropped for clarity. My mom's saying, "You make more, it's only fair." Greg's, "I'll add emotional damage to the invoice." Aaron's, "You're going to ruin the family." Click. Slide 7, why I left. Black screen, white text. My words simple and clear. I gave, you took, and then you left. The final slide faded. I walked back to the head of the table, calm as ever. "Each of you has a box in front of you," I said. "Inside is a copy of this presentation, all the documentation, and a personal letter from me." No one moved. Greg finally sputtered, "What the hell is this, Jake? You trying to humiliate me? You're turning this into some kind of what revenge stunt?" I met his eyes. "No, Greg, I'm turning this into closure." He tried to laugh, but it came out brittle. "So what? You think this makes you look good, that you're some martyr?" "No," I said. "I don't care how I look. I care about what's real. And what's real is that I was used and mocked. And when I stopped playing along, you tried to paint me as the villain." My mom started crying quietly. My dad looked down at the table. Aaron just stared wide-eyed and pale. Greg sneered. "This is pathetic." "Is it?" I asked. "Because I think what's pathetic is handing someone a fake bill on their birthday after they spent years keeping your house from being taken." I turned to the room. "I'm not asking for thanks. I'm not asking for repayment. I'm done asking for anything from any of you." Steve, who had been sitting quietly in the corner the whole time, stood up and walked over. He nodded politely to the group. "I'm just here as a witness," he said, "in case any legal issues arise, and to deliver a message from Jake. Any further harassment, misrepresentation, or defamation, spoken or written, will be met with appropriate legal response." Greg looked like he was about to explode. "You brought a lawyer to dinner." "No," I said, "I brought a boundary." Louise turned the lights back on. Everyone sat frozen. I took one final breath, then reached into my pocket and pulled out a sealed envelope. "This," I said, "is a donation agreement. I just signed this morning. My app, the one I've been building, it's getting a school contract. The first 10% of my earnings are being donated to a fund that covers emergency housing and education expenses for kids in this city." I looked at Greg, kids who didn't choose their parents' mistakes. His wife broke into tears. Greg stood up, fists clenched, but said nothing. I picked up my jacket, nodded to Louise, and turned to leave. As I walked out, my mom called out, voice trembling, "Jake, wait." I paused at the door, turned my head slightly. "Thank you," she said softly. I gave her a single nod, then walked into the night. The fallout came quickly. Greg's circle started shrinking. Melissa shared the ledger with a few other relatives after reading through it. Aaron tried to defend him online, only to be confronted with screenshots and facts. My parents didn't call for a while. When they did, they were different. Quiet, humbled, careful. I never rubbed it in. I didn't need to. The truth did all the work. And me, I kept building, kept working. My boys saw their dad stand up for himself with dignity, not rage. They saw what it looked like to say no without apology. They learned what it meant to draw a line and hold it. One night, weeks later, my oldest son asked, "Do you think they'll ever say sorry?" I thought about it, then I smiled. They don't need to, because I had already moved on. And the next time someone tries to hand me a bill for my kindness, they'll find the door already closed. Some debts are paid in dollars, others in distance.